Let's do it.
All right, we're live. Yeah, so this is video number 2 for the lighting division. No cameras, because I could not figure out how to make my camera work on my laptop, which I'm doing from making this video from a car in the parking lot of a hair salon.
That is impressive. I am not video because my brother-in-law is playing Marvel's Rivals, and I don't want to take all of the internet from him.
So we both have excuses. So instead, you're going to have to look at the cover of Way of Kings and the Word document Photoshop that I made for Oricorio with a Harvard hat.
Both are excellent things to look at, though.
Yeah, pretty good.
My 2 favorite books.
Yeah, some people, they could work on their Discord icon. You know, Chad hasn't changed that Swampert in a while.
My Sailor Moon All Might was there for a long time. It served me well.
It served you well. Yeah, before this, I just had the boring scales. Now I have my true calling, Pom Pom Oricorio.
It's crazy. Some people still have just, like, blank Discord, you know? Like Mickey Mouse overall Discord.
Yeah, wow.
I don't even know what it's supposed to be. Wumpus? No, that's a little design. Not the icon. Ah, well. Regardless. Jumping into Lightning. Hello, everybody. I think that Plasma is better than Lightning. Stronger teams, harder division. But I also think it's very close.
Yeah.
And I'm not biased whatsoever.
Yeah, Plasma has the 2 clear standout best teams of the entire draft, being me and Icona, of course. No bias. But jumping down to Lightning. So I since Monday, when we made the video 2 days ago, I've thought a little bit more about why I have such a problem with, and jumping into Peter here, the teams that are a bit wider in terms of, like, they took all 12 guys. They don't have too many guys at the top. You know, Peter doesn't even have a 12-point Mon. And he's got a bunch of these 4, 6, 2-point fellas. And I think that what I've the idea that I've coalesced around is that the problem with a team like this is that you have a lot of potentially tricky niche Pokemon like Pikachu or Ludicolo or Shiftry, which could catch someone off guard with the perfect set and the perfect circumstance. But you're also going to have, because the average power of each of your guys is lower, you're going to have a lot more trouble with the teams that are just 6 solid dudes. And I feel like when we were going over the Plasma teams, we looked at a lot of people's drafts, like Thribe's, like yours. You know, let's see what else. Not so much like Riker's, where they're pretty top heavy, but the Mons are all very versatile and work well together. And I feel like a team like Peter's, you look at these 12 things, and maybe you can't prepare for all of them. Maybe you just hard.
But do you have to? You know,
exactly. And it's like maybe you just make a good team, and you throw some ice coverage on something for Gligar that you might not have otherwise, and maybe that gets you through. And if Peter comes up with the perfect set to 6-0 you, you know, maybe that happens too. But I think that relying on that, and surely that will happen. You know, it's Peter. That's going to happen.
Of course.
But I think that relying on that over a course of a season is just tough. I think that it requires a lot of. I think that with a team like Peter's, you just have to spend a lot more time, you know, coming up with these really niche specific sets. And I don't know if that's time that Peter is actually going to devote to the draft. Peter's a great player, but he also becomes extremely busy very randomly, and then is suddenly just running his teams that he ran the previous week, you know? So I think that
right.
If I'm looking at Peter's team, it's not necessarily that these are bad Pokemon. I think all of them are actually pretty useful. Ludicolo is good, you know, good Rain Sweeper, Basculegion, same. Hitmontop, Spinner, Intimidate. Braviary is a good Terra Pokemon. I think that when I look at Peter's team, kind of also considering just what happens to Peter sometimes in the middle of the draft season, which is that he drops off the radar, I worry that this team has it's a bit too reliant on him finding a gimmick through like pretty intense
prep, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I just don't know that for Peter is going to work.
Right. Definitely off the back of that, I think a lot of people would agree with me. I think Peter is like the best team builder, and I think he comes up with these crazy sets, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like, what am I supposed to do about that? Like, well done. I guess I just lose. And like you said, when that set comes and you get 6-0, you're just like, damn. Okay, well, next week, time to move.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, I was like, Peter's got all these different things. He's got all these different options. But also in looking at it, I am inclined to agree with you, especially with something like Inteleon still on the board. He could have taken out, some of those shitters at the bottom, taken out Porygon Z, gotten Inteleon, and just actually had a real rain threat always there that you had to deal with or just couldn't deal with. I think Thundurus has a ton of pressure on it and is going to be like pretty instrumental in the teams to give it any sort of momentum or I don't even know, just like workability. I ended my notes by saying that if Peter manages to play all of his games, he's going to do pretty well. But that's kind of the thing, right? He usually misses 2 or 3, and yeah, he gets busy. And I think you're totally correct that without intense, dedicated prep, it will be kind of a tricky team to run. You can't just slap a choice scarf or a choice band on some of these Pokemon and go for it. You really do need to sort of crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
I do like Esper Wing, Brave H, Galar, Articuno at home. I also really like Goodra, but Goodra certainly has its flaws too. Just hit it with anything that learns close combat and it crumbles.
Yeah, I do like Goodra. I like a lot of the rain stuff he has, like Amoonguss, Basculegion, I think is really strong. So like in terms of what he has drafted, I don't think this is a bad draft team. I did maybe initially think that when I looked at it. I was like, what's Shiftry doing down here? What's Pikachu doing here? But I think that it does have like he could build solid cores here. I don't love Politoed for 10 points. I mean, I get that it's the only rain option, but Politoed is just so hard to make work for a rain team because you're constantly switching it out. But
it's still Politoed.
It's still Politoed, but I think also like a lot of the things he might be switching into from Politoed, like an Amoonguss or a Goodra, do have enough bulk that you can kind of just hard switch into them and it'd be fine. But I'm just not totally sure where he's getting in, like how he's getting in a Basculegion.
Without sacking something, right?
Yep, because he doesn't have a lot of even Goodra. Like maybe Goodra is your mid ground when you're switching in Politoed, but Goodra doesn't have a pivoting move. Amoonguss doesn't have a pivoting
recovery.
Move. Yeah, or recovery. So like, how are you getting out from Politoed to the other guys?
I think a little bit of like consolidating would do this team pretty good. Trim some of the fat, get a couple more like strong, just overtly in a vacuum, objectively strong Pokemon. And because I don't know, if I see Pikachu coming, yeah, maybe there's that 6-0 set that we're talking about, but like, cool, Pikachu's here, I can breathe slightly easier. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the kind of vibe he's going for, but I don't know. I've seen Peter draft better teams, but I also know that if Peter shows up to every game and does well, like it has the opportunity to prep, he can still very easily make those the top 2 spots that give him the first round bye.
Yeah, and I do also think that if Peter just like consolidated this into a strong rain team, like he probably would have a lot less fun and wouldn't work as hard. Like if he just had his 6 rain guys and maybe brings his Terra, then he's probably like, I just can't see Peter having as much fun with that as this like random pile of 12 kind of whatever guys. So maybe part of it too is like when he has all of this, the possibilities are endless. He'll have a lot more fun just putting together ideas, and that'll lead to better teams.
I think Hitmontop is a great spinner at 4 points. Perhaps a little undervalued, but it would have been a fun Terra Pokemon. But Brave H is excellent.
Yeah, and Hitmontop's a good, potential switch for his Terra 2, running something like Technician, Terra Ice, Triple Axle could like really mess someone up who's not expecting it. He's got a lot of things that he could switch his Terra to. Like even, Terra Ludicolo in the rain sounds probably pretty good.
That could be pretty solid, right? Yeah. That is a bargain of a rain pick. I mean, there are obviously better ones, but
yeah, Ludicolo I think is great. Yeah. I think that you kind of need it to be on a rain team to get any value out of it, but I think that if you're already bringing rain,
totally agree.
Then grabbing it for 2 points is a good pickup. It's a good mon. It can run
I
really
could talk
hard.
about Peter's team for a long time, though.
But let's move on to Bestrin.
Sorry, Peter. Okay, I'll start by saying that when I originally did my notes, Bestrin had a misunderstanding about what moves were available on what Pokemon. And I don't know if our sheets have been updated, but I think some of my big concerns was, hey, you drafted 12 Pokemon and you didn't get removal. Getting Veluza and Berserker out for Drifloon was pretty good. I think it'll be a fun Terra Pokemon. It's got like I love what Flare Boost, Unburdened. It's got cool stuff. I think it has fun options because it's got all the spooky ghost utility moves, stuff like that. But otherwise, I think this is like the most classic Bestrin team of all time. He got all the fan favorites. He got all the Pokemon he loves. I doubted it, but we saw Flareon go hard yesterday. I definitely that he made me eat my words. I was watching that from his living room while he was playing, and just sitting there like, wow, I was wrong. Turns out Flareon has some cool use cases. Rocks make Articuno and Flareon tough because you don't always want to bring boots, but you know, I wanted Iron Thorns myself. We all love Scrafty. Scrafty's awesome. I am not sold on Munkidori as Pokemon. I think it's really good, but I think that anything that has to rely on Focus Blast is going to be somewhat limited in its capacity to beat out Steels. And I don't think that the rest of his team is actually all that great at beating out like a bulky Steel. Now, do we have any other bulky Steels in the tier? No, Peter doesn't have one.
Fortress, which is pretty good. Wall. Goodra
Stop
H.
Burns doesn't have one.
Chad's got Goodra H.
Mm-hmm.
Oswald is going to be running. I guess he has Bisharp, but yeah, Bisharp. So you got to hit a Focus Blast against Bisharp. It's got the double immunity to your stabs, which is rough.
Bronzong, is gonna be a tough one for Munkidori. Registeel, like they're, although that one already happened.
This is actually a pretty tough.
It isn't my favorite Mon. Yeah, exactly. It's great pivot. It's got cool stuff, and I think it has the potential to do really well. But it's sort of like I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. Love Haxorus. Cresselia can be passive, but can also not be passive. He's got good hazards. Without Defog, Whimsicott, I don't rate as highly, but it's hard to judge the whole team based on that because he assumed Whimsicott did have Defog and built the team around that idea.
Yeah.
If he knew it didn't, I think the team would look different. But regardless, here we are.
What I like
good team. He showed he can clearly use it against Nips, and yeah, I think it'll be a solid season for Bestrin.
One thing I like about this team for Bestrin is that I feel like a lot of these guys like Scrafty and Whimsicott, like he's shown that regardless of the tier we're playing in, he'll draft them. So now that they're actually kind of suitably powered to the tier that he's playing in, I think that he's going to have a much easier time using them than maybe he's used to. I think I really like his team. I think that I think Iron Thorns for 6 is great. It's got a 4 times ground resist, but throw an air balloon on that guy, get one Dragon Dance, and you're probably going to be able to clean up a team where you've removed their physical check. You got Haxorus to kind of
especially with Cresselia as well to just like, yeah, sure, I'll eat that Earthquake for you.
Exactly, yeah. Cresselia is great. Cresselia, Drifblim too, like getting that in and getting a Calm Mind up, and then getting another one because you get your Terra, and Drifblim can really snowball pretty quickly. I think
all you gotta do is crit it, though.
Yeah, true. I think probably the only thing that I'm really concerned about for this team is that, Whimsicott doesn't have a lot of, it's a fine special attacker, but Grass Fairy isn't the best at breaking through. Like, it can't break through Steels. Whimsicott has nothing to touch Steels. Munkidori, kind of the same, unless you're throwing out Focus Blast and hoping for the best. And then Gastrodon and Scrafty, they're like, a bit passive. They can run a bit more offensive, but they don't really like to be.
Scrafty in particular can be more offensive. The Gastrodon, I find, outside of I know who's bringing Specs to Earth Power, but outside of an Earth Power, it may struggle a little bit against the Steels.
And kind of same for Articuno, Flareon, Houndstone. Like, they all can be more offensive, but they tend to be a bit more on the bulky utility side of things. And Cresselia, I mean, unless you get 4 Calm Minds, you're not doing anything to anyone. valid win con for Cresselia is to get 4 Calm Minds, but I think that, the only things that are providing like immediate offensive pressure are Haxorus, Munkidori, and Iron Thorns, which is maybe just like I would maybe want one more strong fast hitter on this team because Thorns is
I
slow.
agree, especially because Iron Thorns, he might get relegated to hazard duty anyway.
He might get relegated to hazard duty. He's base like 70 speed. Munkidori is fast. Haxorus is, passably fast. But if you got one more thing, like, I don't know, looking across the tiers, it doesn't really matter. What else? Like, I don't know, like an Espeon or something, something fast, slot in, pivot out. I think that would do well just to sort of help enable the more passive lines of play that Brett likes to kind of get into sometimes, and that he's good at, working his way out of.
Closing out those games, right? When he's able to find those paths.
Now, one thing I will say is that from my duo season with Brett, he has a really good sense of when, you're kind of, you get in these loops of like, I have my 3 guys I'm pivoting between, you've got your 3 guys you're pivoting between. He has a really good sense of, how many repetitions it needs to go before he makes a random double into something like a Choice Band Haxorus. His predictions for like when to just break kind of a cycle at the right time is really good. And I think that, Thorns, pop into your booster mon, you get your free turn because you made a prediction on where they were going when. Haxorus, kind of same thing, get your Swords Dance up on a free turn. I think that, and I feel like with Haxorus and Thorns, if you get a free turn to get, a couple kills, then a core of Cresselia, Scrafty, Gastrodon might just become unbreakable. So I think that, yeah. So I think that Brett he drafted a lot of good things, and they're things that he's going to use well.
I agree. To round it out, they are all like comfort picks. It's so easy to be like, I want to draft new Pokemon. I've used this guy before. I'm not using him again. Even if he was good, even if he was fun. But I think these are all picks that he is comfortable with. He already knows how to build with him. There's always that like the growing pains a little bit of, well, what does this Pokemon actually do? I understand that this is its role, but how do I fulfill that? Yeah. And I don't think he has to mess around with that this time, which is obviously always very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, good team, Brett. Moving on to Stop Burns, one of the new folks.
Welcome to the party. I'm sorry in advance if anyone bullies you. If we bully you, I'm less sorry, but still.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start off. No hard feelings, but I am going to bully you a little bit. When I look at this team from Stop Burns, I am just not quite sure what it's trying to accomplish and how it's going to do it. I think that there's a lot of things on this team which kind of flounder in singles. Looking kind of at Dusclops. Incineroar is pretty good, but it's good in singles, but it's more of a doubles kind of pick. Grimmsnarl, Glastrier. Looking at Quagsire and Hippowdon, I feel like there's a lot of overlap in what they're trying to do. Kleavor, I think, is great on basically any team. Stone Axe is a broken move. It can run a bunch of sets. So I like Kleavor basically anywhere, but I think that Kleavor plus a bunch of sort of passive walls with, Dusclops and Spiritomb kind of overlapping as well. Passimian's fine, but I think Passimian and Kleavor have a bit of overlap in terms of like running either a Scarf or a Band set being a pivot. And Noivern, I like Noivern on almost any team, but I just don't really see where the synergies in this team are going to work. I think that Quagsire and Hippowdon, they just have too much that they are both weak to, and that it's hard to imagine putting both of them on a team and making them work. And I think that when I look at a lot of these teams, I wonder, like, these two Pokemon that seem similar, can you ever bring them together? And sometimes the answer is yes, because they like are two physical breakers that when you bring both of them, maybe they can power through a check. Like two things that both put a lot of pressure on Skarmory kind of thing. They might be really similar, but you can kind of beat down the physical check that enables both of them to do better than if you just brought one. But I think with Hippowdon and Quagsire, which are, passive walls who share a grass weakness, and, Quagsire isn't especially bulky on its own merit, I think that it's hard to justify ever bringing both of them. And yeah, I think that there's just too much on this team that feels a bit like it's relying on, like last year with a trick room strategy from Desklops, for example, which like can work, but is hard to make work in singles consistently. And I think that being kind of the
Right,
core of a
right.
team is just, I think that Stopburns is going to have trouble pulling this off without, losing half of his team or things getting chipped down. And then just when the strategy is actually put in place, getting enough mileage out of it to justify the cost of getting it set up.
Well, I'll let you be the bad cop. I think that this team does have some cool stuff. I think it definitely has flaws. I think it's some decent walls and some excellent pivots, but they don't pivot into anything. They just sort of pivot into one another and then keep clicking U-turn, and nothing really comes of it. Because Kleavor is great. You guys know I love Kleavor, but he's not going to be your guy. You don't want to swords dance with him and click X scissor and stone X every time. It's just he doesn't have the speed for it. I will say, while I completely agree with the typing imbalance of Quagsire and Hippowdon, that they like to, they have the capacity to force what you specifically call like checkmate situations, where, oh, you can't break these two Pokemon, I think I just win. All I have to do is play patiently and keep recovering and play correctly, and you can't break these guys. That being said, I would like to see other things. Incineroar is good, but it's not going to be the thing that like really wants to force out your grass, your opponent's grass type. Having Eviolite, Violite on your Dusclops is tough, because anything that takes a knock is not what you want to have holding an item. Or y'all know what I mean. Passimian's kind of trash. I don't know. I think it needs just more direct offense. I think we talked about it a little bit in the previous video, that there are Pokemon that you draft and you're like, I can't wait to draft these guys. And then you get them and you're like, oh, what do they do? And I think Glastier is one of those guys. Like you said, Trick Room sets are cool. They can be excellent. But I feel like we have, over the course of 7 seasons, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 games a season where, it's 16 plus teams every season, 8 weeks, where a Trick Room is successful. Sometimes they get it off, but, the opponent dances around it well, and every now and then it actually works to full capacity and you sweep with it. But it's pretty rare. Even when it was Terra, it still was not the best Pokemon. Light Clay being banned makes Grimmsnarl a little tough, but none of us really click in screens anyway. And if you do, Burns, that is your prerogative. No one's going to fault you for it. It just isn't as good without Light Clay. And, yeah. I think this team has also a weird amount of setup. It has decent setup, but you almost want it as the mix-up setup, Incineroar running Swords Dance or Nasty Plot isn't what you want to bring every time. It works really well because you're suddenly, on game 4, you're not pivoting with it. It's now setting up when they expected you to pivot with it, and now you can blow a big hole in the opponent's team or something like that. I do think he's got potential to do well with it. I'm excited to see how he does. I understand that he's played a chunk of competitive, but mostly ladder, but is not unfamiliar with the game. And I'm just excited to see if it actually if the team pans out how he wants it to.
Yeah, and I actually think that there's a lot here that is really good together. It's just kind of, I think that a couple changes would really enable it. I would look at getting rid of Quagsire for one, because I agree that Quagsire and Hippowdon are kind of like, they can force that checkmate, you can't kill me scenario. But I don't know that having both of them helps any more than having one of them, because I feel like something that's going to be able to break through Quagsire will also break through Hippowdon,
Yeah, you're totally right.
I would probably look to get rid of Dusclops, just because I feel like you're just not going to get enough mileage out of your Terra here, because as a wall, you don't have any recovery. So even if you become a bit bulkier by going Terra Water or something like that, I think that you're still going to get worn down in the same way that you would if you stayed Ghost, and it doesn't get any offensive mileage out of Terra.
I totally agree. Removal is tricky as well, because you don't really ever want to have Kleavor or Noivern press and defog. You want them to be hitting their big moves, especially with the rest of the team lineup.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd say you almost really can't have them clicking defog. That's almost a waste of a turn.
Yep. And I would look at getting rid of Passimian too, just because I think that it's running almost the same coverage as Kleavor. But I think changing Quagsire
just worse.
Yeah, it's just a bit worse. But I think changing Quagsire out for something that maybe could still work in the sand, but has a bit more of an offensive presence. I think probably keeping one of Incineroar or Grimmsnarl, because they're both dark types that are parting shotting. I think they're both decent for 8 points, but I think having both of them, you could just maybe get a little bit more grabbing like an 8-point fairy type that's not a dark type kind of thing.
I don't think they exist. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah,
Fairies were so limited this time. You know, I can't really fault anybody this season for not getting a fairy or not getting a steel, because there were only like 4 good ones.
Yeah.
But I still think there are 8-point Pokemon in the tier, looking at it now, that are solid. We've seen good success with Araquanid. Not my favorite Pokemon, but like he can be tricky. He can be big. You love Medicham.
Yeah, Araquanid.
You know, stuff like that.
Araquanid could be a good switch for Quagsire here too, because it's giving something different. And webs with Glastrier and Kleavor is actually pretty hard to deal with.
Slowing this other team down and not having to rely on Trick Room to do it could be pretty important.
Yeah, and the things that aren't affected by webs, you know, the flying types, Kleavor wants those to come in on StoneX anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be a potential. Honestly, I think switching Quagsire for Araquanid would be a really good positive change. Then maybe looking to switch Terra Captain, and you know, seeing whether Incineroar is worth keeping. Because I do like Grimmsnarl as a fairy type that can potentially run Prankster, Bulk Up, you know, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. But I'm a big Incineroar fan personally. I think they both get it, but I think Parting Shot is crazy. Parting Shot, Overheat, Taunt, like pick another move is always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Intimidate cycles are real tasty.
Mm-hmm.
Does Grimmsnarl get Intimidate as well?
It does not. It does not.
Mm.
I don't think. Let's see.
Spirit Break's nice though. It can be good. It can be good in the right situation.
There are answers to these questions at the tip of my fingers. Nope. I do like Frisk in draft though. Prankster's probably almost always better, but scouting items can really help. You know, just if you have I need to figure out these couple sets and then I can win, checkmate kind of game plan in mind. Frisk on Noivern, Frisk on Grimmsnarl could help. And on
very true.
And on Dusclops, they all get Frisk. Is that what we've overlooked? These are all Frisk guys.
I always forget about Frisk, and I know you and Bestron are Frisk believers, and I've seen it really work over the past couple seasons, and I think it's really cool. Whenever I'm drafting, I'm never like, oh, I got to get a Frisk Pokemon.
Yeah.
I mean, Norman was on my list, but that's because he's fast and learns Draco Meteor and U-turn. Yeah. I'm a simple man.
Let's move on to King of Mistakes, aka Little
King
Robo.
of Mistakes, Brobo, making his first full appearance. I love to see it. King of Mistakes has been involved in varying degrees in previous seasons, and while he's never played a full season on his own, I think that having Robo in his corner and having that experience of the league will really help. Like, I think it really changes your second season. You draft so much differently than you did your first season, right? And I think he's gotten that experience, and he was able to, I think, really take it to heart. Chad will disagree. Salamence, arguably the best Pokemon in the format. Gyaptos probably better, whatever. But I think Empoleon, Ribombee, and Salamence is an amazing core. I really like cores in general in drafts, and I think that Dragon, Steel, Fairy is my preferred core. I personally went Water, Fire, Grass this time, but I'm already feeling it. I wish I had gone Dragon, Steel, Fairy, because those 3 types are exceptional at the moment. No one's really used Empoleon. People always say it's overvalued or it's too expensive, but I think competitive here in such a defog heavy season is going to be pretty cool. Salamence is Salamence. It's always a threat, no matter, even if it's a defensive set. You still got to really prepare for it. Ribombee's the same way. If you one quiver to answer 2, and you probably just lose, right? Plus webs. I know a lot of people are excited about Terra Embor, which I think could be really fun. I think it's just going to still kind of struggle with its speed, but it'll hit hard as hell. He's got good removal. He's got good hazards. And I think the division as a whole doesn't always have the best removal. Speed tier's okay. Could be better. Pivots are pretty good. Could be better. But I think this is a really cool team. And I am excited to see what Robo at Sea and his little brother are going to cook up. Or sorry,